Hey everybody, welcome back to the next episode of the Balanced Vibes podcast. I am Kirsten, your host, of course, and thank you so much for being here. So I know that it's been a minute since our last podcast episode, and some of you know that I had some issues with Apple Podcasts. For some reason, my podcast episodes just stopped publishing on Apple Podcasts on iTunes, and I didn't know why this was. I reached out to them and took a lot of back and forth figuring out what had happened. And here, shout out to my amazing husband who always figures these things out eventually. So hopefully this podcast will now publish on iTunes and of course on YouTube too. It has never been an issue there, but hopefully everything will be back to normal now. So today I'm going to start a new mini series, and it's going to be a 4-part series where I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself, and not because I think that I'm so important and everybody has to know about me, but because in the last year, my audience has shifted a lot, and understandably so, because my messaging has shifted a lot. And some of you know me from something totally different before, and some of you are new. So I want to give you kind of like an idea of what I'm doing, why I'm doing the things the way I am doing them, what is the whole background when it comes to my relationship with food and fitness and all that good stuff, how I got into macro coaching and personal training, and why health is really, really important part in my life, and why my coaching is so heavily focused also on your health. It's not only about losing that body fat, although this is important. If you have this goal, if you have performance goal, this is great. We can do all these things, but also why health is so important. And I also want to show you that balance is possible. So maybe you are one of those people who feel like I'm always doing something extreme. So maybe at one point in your life, you are overtraining and you are running like crazy and you're barely eating because you have this goal to look a certain way and you think this is the way to do it. And then maybe you are in the opposite end where you are not exercising much and you are eating a little too much and you're not feeling comfortable in your body. And let me tell you, I have been in both of these extremes, and I find that now I am in the middle. And I want to show you that it is possible. I want to also share with you what helped me to find that middle place where I'm feeling good and I'm not doing extreme stuff on either end of the spectrum. So today is the first episode out of the 4, and I want to give you a little bit more like a early guest and backstory. So how I got interested in health and fitness. So it all actually started when I was about 9. I think this was the time when I joined the track and field team, and I really liked it a lot. So my mom has never been too athletic. She's always like moved a lot and walked a lot and like doing like dancing and stuff like that. And my parents are divorced, so I didn't get like much impact from my dad, although I know that he was very athletic. So he was into high jumping, I think I've heard, and he was really athletic. So I think there's a little bit of like genetic component there, but I wasn't from a super athletic family. In like my mom was like doing stuff all the time. No, but I do remember that I was about 9 years old when I got started with track and field, and I don't even remember how I started, but I did. And a couple of years later, I also added basketball. I'm not very, very short. I'm a little bit on the taller side, so I did pretty well in basketball as well. And at the same time, my mom and my grandparents really wanted me to learn to play piano, and I had to go to this music school and take piano lessons. And at first I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a try. I wasn't against it. And my grandfather, he was a musician and he knew everything about music. He was like, you are so gifted. You are so talented. You got to do this. And so I did, but I found that I didn't like it at all. It was nothing that I was passionate about. And every time I was sitting there like playing piano, I was thinking I would be so much happier if I was like running sprints right now or practice long jump or high jump right now. But I had to kind of split my time between the two things. And I was really getting really frustrated with the piano. I did not want to do it at all. And so it took a long time for me to convince my mom that, Mom, I don't want to do this. Let me just go do track and field. and she didn't want me to, to stop playing piano. I'm sure many of you have heard the same thing, like, you're gonna regret this when you grow up, and then you wish you had done this. And I was like, well, I don't know, I don't think so, because you are, 10 years old, 12 years old, you're like, whatever, I want to do my thing. And so this is when I finally was able to put my eggs in one basket, and I was able to quit the piano and study track and field, and also played basketball on the side. So throughout my school years, I never had any issues with weight or nothing like that. Food was never a problem in our home. Like, my mom was never a dieter. I never got any this kind of bad influence from my home, which I know many people did get, and this is what kind of led them into disordered eating habits and all that. I had none of that. And so also weight was never an issue for me because I was so active. I did so many things. I didn't know what a calorie was. And I've always had a really big sweet tooth, so I'd always eat a lot of sweets. But because I was so active, I burned it all, and it was never really an issue for me. I was pretty slim, in a great shape, and there was a lot of natural movement too when I grew up, because I grew up in a really small town and we didn't even have a car. I know, sometimes when I tell this story to some people, they're like, oh my goodness, you didn't have a car? How did you ever get around? But if you live in a small town, you just walk everywhere. And so I remember we walked to school, it was about 15 minutes, and then you walk back from school back home, and then you walk to your track practice, which is also 15 minutes, and then you walk back from track practice, plus you did a lot of stuff in your practice. So of course, you're active all the time, and it was never an issue. Like, I never had to think about the scale or the weight or none of these things. It was never really a problem. And so these were the how I really got interested in track and field. And I was like, my sister would always tell me, you're like living encyclopedia, all the athletes, their results, or the Olympic Games. And it is interesting because even just a couple of days ago, Hugh and I, we were at a restaurant, and then I don't know what we started talking about some javelin thrower, and he was like, oh, do you know what year this result was? Do you know what year this Olympics was in which city? And I knew it. I still knew it because I literally used to study these books from cover to cover. This is how excited I was about track and field. And our practice was really intense too. And this is where I think, being involved in sports or something like that is really important for most kids. I'm so grateful that I did it because it really teaches you resilience and hard work. So you can't just give up and walk away when things get difficult. You have to push through. You have to power through. So remember, some of our workouts were, in the winter time, there was so much snow outside. The snow was up to your thighs, basically. And we had to jump in piles of snow, which is a great exercise for developing your jumping power and strength that is required for that specific skill. Or then we would run with a car tire attached to our waist with a rope. And so you just sprint like that. So we did tons of things like that. And so there was never this idea that I'm going to give up. I'm not, going to go home and watch TV. And I was definitely the hardest worker in our track team. And, it may seem like bragging, but it's not. It's just a fact. And I remember there's some couple other kids who were 10 times more talented than I was, but they just didn't want to do the work. And a lot of times our coach had to go to their house and go get them because they didn't want to come to practice. For me, it was never an issue. So I was always, the first one there, did all the work in weekends. So eventually javelin throw ended up being my main event. So in weekends, I would just, go throw my own javelin outside of practice. I would go running outside of my practice. I would do all of the things because I was so obsessed with becoming a good athlete. But you can work as hard as you want and you can out train everybody, but unfortunately if you don't have the natural gift, the natural talent, then it's not going to work out. You have to have be pretty decent at it. So I realized by the age of maybe 20 that okay, this is not going to work out. I am not as gifted as needed. I can try as hard as I want, but I didn't have the results that I had always desired. And so my big dream, become like a super amazing athlete that everybody knows in the world, it didn't really come true. But I still got this like desire for like sports, and this like I loved doing it. I loved the work that went into it. I loved seeing results. Like I really literally loved all the process. And I think it also, like I said, it gave me like such a good foundation for life in general later, because if you have been through something really difficult in every workout, you have to get yourself together and get the work done, then it really builds your character and really builds your personality. So these were the first, not the first years, but these were my, let's say, high school and first years of college, and everything was great then. But then I decided to stop, and this is where things went in a different direction. I actually started gaining a lot of weight, and this is where we get to in the next episode. And like I said, if this episode for you sounded like, okay, yeah, it's interesting, but there's no point really, or what did I learn from it, it will all come together in the third and fourth, and a little bit in the second episode as well. So you see the whole development of my story and why I'm doing the things the way I'm doing right now. So I hope this at least was a little bit interesting for you to listen to. Maybe you can resonate, maybe not, but I always want to hear from you. So is your story similar? Have you always been athletic? Have you always loved sports? Or were you different? Were you like, oh, I hated this, but I have to do this to get my weight down? Or because, I don't know, maybe your parents forced you to do something like that. Kind of like my mom and grandparents really wanted me to take piano lessons. I don't know. So I'm excited to hear from you. And the next episode will be ready very soon for you. So stay tuned for that. And thank you so much for being here today.